Worship was never confined to the Sabbath, and the Sabbath is never presented as the worship day or the exclusive day where worship can happen. It's like a wedding ring that a husband and wife share to express their exclusivity to each other.
The Sabbath of the Jews was kept from evening to evening. It started in the darkness and ended in the darkness, but the new day starts at the dawn of the first day where the sun is rising. There's kind of this picture and imagery that's happening there when God talks about this new day. Well, if you concede that with a lot of them, they're going to say, well, then that means that the seventh-day Sabbath is still binding because it's rooted in creation. I would agree with you, except one caveat. The only way it can be abolished is if there's a new creation. And there is a new creation. And so, again, it all goes back to understanding new creation.
Jewish scholars and rabbis understood, explained, and wrestled with the fact that God is not subject to the Sabbath. And the truth is, when you read the Sabbath narratives of Jesus, he is actually consistently violating the Sabbath. In fact, that's one of the main reasons that they really wanted to kill him and rejected him, that he's from God. According to John chapter 9, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath.
When Jesus was going to the synagogue, it shows that Adventists have not been taught the distinction and difference between the temple and the synagogue. The synagogue and the temple were not the same thing. They'll list out every time it mentions Paul going to the synagogue, and they equate that to Paul was keeping the Sabbath, not understanding, no, Paul was doing evangelism. Paul was going to evangelize. He wasn't going to worship Jesus with people who rejected Jesus.
We don't see Christ setting an example of Sabbath keeping. In all of those examples of Sabbath narratives in the Gospels, we see where Christ is challenging Jewish understanding of the Sabbath, and he's actually using the Sabbath as a vehicle to point to himself as one who is greater than the Sabbath, as one who gives rest, as one who is above the Sabbath, and as one who fulfills it. And he is the one who actually gives that rest to the soul, and not this day that they looked forward to give them rest.
Amen.
The Jews had idolized the Sabbath in the same way that SDs idolize it today. And in all of those narratives, he shifted attention and focus from the Sabbath to himself.
The new creation was typified by the Jubilee year, which was the year after the seventh seven. So the eighth motif is happening there. Christ declared himself, like EJ said, to be a fulfillment of the Jubilee, Luke 4:19. Every Sunday is the day after the seventh, which is like a miniature Jubilee.
The Sabbath, the Jubilee is referring to me. And that's what the passage is about. And they were so enraged at him saying that, and they tried to throw him over to kill him. Because how dare he says he's the Jubilee, he's the Sabbath, he's the fulfillment of these things. That's what the passage is about. It's not about him being an example of Sabbath keeping.
Yeah.
He says it's an insult to the grace of Christ to continue to observe a seventh-day Sabbath. I tell this to SDAs all the time, and their heads explode. They think, and the reason why is because you're essentially signing and memorializing to the world, the Messiah hasn't come, we're still looking for him. We're being led through the wilderness of life by a better Moses, a better Joshua, who's leading a better Exodus into a better promised land, a better Sabbath, all of these things.
Amen.
We're busy celebrating these things